Good morning, everyone. This is Leanne from Of Love and Shiplap and the founder of That Sublimation Graphics and Tutorials here on Facebook. If you're joining us on YouTube, please be sure to come join our Facebook group. And if you're catching us live on Facebook, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Those links are in the video description, depending on where you're watching. Today, I'm going to be showing you how to create your own template for just about any substrate. Now, there's a few reasons why I'm doing this tutorial. The first is because there is an alarming number of people who apparently do not know how to use a ruler. So I'm going to first, go over the basics of how to measure simple substrates and determine what basic shape would be used for those. And I will, of course, show you guys how to translate that into your design program. And then the other is that for stuff that's a custom shape, you might not have a template. And if you're doing something like this photo panel, obviously, if you put a photo here, you don't want the letters to cut off the top of it if it's something important. So having a template for something like this is beneficial for your own design work. And also, if you're a supplier, you should be offering templates. And your template should not be this scanned in on the computer and calling that good. Like, to me, that's kind of a poor customer service point if you do that, because a scanned PDF or a PNG does not give people a fillable vector file that they can actually use for their own printing. So if you are selling blanks, and blank suppliers in general should be giving you templates. Most of the major companies do provide templates. It's just we have so many smaller sellers now, and some of them have unique products that they cut, and they're the ones who don't have templates. So if you find yourself without one, or if you're selling blanks and you need to make one, then this is the video for you. The other reason you might want templates is if you're a designer and you just want to try and meet the design needs for those who are selling blanks. I know that's one of the things that I use templates for. So I'm going to be showing you guys how to do that and fill your template, make it nice and easy. I promise that this is really easy. I'm going to be showing it to you in Affinity Designer, but I will just lightly go over a few things that you can take note of and also do in programs like Silhouette or Inkscape. I'm not going to be covering those specifically because they are not, Silhouette is not a graphic design program, and you're just going to get more use out of something like GIMP, Inkscape, Photoshop, Affinity Designer, or Corel. And this process is pretty universal no matter what program you're using. Now, Affinity Designer is, of course, my program of choice, and we have the most videos on that, so I'm going to show you that nice and easy. I promise this will not be painful, and you guys will be so confident in making your own templates, whether it's for something that's simple or something that's more complex. So I'm going to go ahead and turn you guys around, and we'll kind of go through the different types of substrates. And I will show you guys how to measure them, and then we'll go on to the tracing and scanning and show you guys how to use all that on your computer. So let's go ahead and see what we're working with.
Most sublimation substrates are pretty straightforward shapes. For example, as I already showed you, the wallet, we can see that space is a rectangle. This puzzle is a rectangle. This notepad holder is a square. This barrette is a circle. So setting up a template for these is really as simple as measuring them and entering and using the shape tool in whatever design program you're using and setting it to the measurements which we get. Now, I see a lot of people who will ask in groups what the measurements are for different items. It's important that you measure everything yourself. In the manufacturing world, there's always variances in the size of items. So with that in mind, you might have 10 of these puzzles that you bought from the same supplier, and wherever that supplier got it in the manufacturing process, they could be 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch, maybe even 1/2 an inch off. This might not seem like such a big deal until you print your transfer and it's 1/4 of an inch too short, and then you have a white line right here and you just wasted a $2 puzzle. In the world of business, we don't really want to be wasting money, and having all these extra losses because these are supplies that we could have been selling. If you don't know how to read a ruler, you're not alone. However, you do need to learn. I mean that in the nicest way possible, but the reality of it is that in this entire niche, in this entire industry, you have to be able to measure to determine the size of your designs, to determine the size of the templates you need to make, or even what size to size different things. So you need to know how to read a ruler or a tape measure. Now, I personally always use a tape measure because a lot of substrates are bigger than 12 inches. I'm just using this generic Stanley Power Lock tape measure. I've got like 5 of them. And if you don't know how to read the lines on a ruler, first I'll just tell you what they are. The shortest ones, sorry, there's a little bit of glare. The shortest ones are 1/16. The ones in between it are 1/8. The longer ones are 1/4, and then the longest one, of course, is 1/2, or the 1 inch mark. Now you can buy a ruler or a tape measure that has these little lines marked for you. They're available on Amazon. They're around $12, $13. If you just search tape measure with measurements on it, it will give you what you're looking for. If you don't want to have to deal with trying to convert fractions into decimals all the time, you can actually get a digital tape measure, which has a little screen right here that when you pull your tape measure out, it's going to give you the reading. So I don't have any of that, obviously, because I do know how to read a tape measure. So I'm going to go ahead and measure our puzzle just to give you guys an idea. So this one is 7 1/8 by 5 3/16, which I would just round that up to 5 1/4 to make things a little bit easier. So we're going to go ahead and write down our measurements just so we have them. Get a piece of paper here. So we had 5 1/4 by 7 and I think it was just 7 1/8, right? We're going to measure it again. Okay, yeah, 7 1/8. Okay, so decimal wise, that's going to be 5.25 by 7.25 inches for our puzzle. Now, what we're going to do with those measurements is we're going to open up our design program and we're going to select our shape tool. Now, it doesn't matter what program you're using, you're going to have that shape tool. So I'm going to switch you over to the computer and I'll show you that, and then we'll come back and I'll talk to you guys about measuring or creating templates for odd size substrates. Over on our computer, I'm going to show you how to use the shape tool to create your template in Silhouette, Inkscape, and Affinity Designer. So the first thing that we want to do is resize our workspace to be the same size that our print page is going to be. Because our puzzle measurements were 5.25 inches by 7.125 inches, a letter size page will suffice. So we'll click on our page setup panel and we'll go ahead and modify this for an 8.5 by 11 page. Now this is the page size that will be printed. You want to make sure that this also matches up with your print setup. So we'll do File, Print Page Setup, and make sure that letter is selected. Next, we're going to use our shape tool to create the basic shape that our puzzle is. All design programs have 2 sets of shape tools. You'll find your basic shape tool, which is circles, squares, rectangles, and then your custom shape tools, which can vary depending on the program that you're using. We will go ahead and select our Draw a Rectangle tool and simply click and drag. We're going to make these the correct measurements up in our measurement section of our navigation bar. So I will do the width to be 5.25 and the height to be that 7.125 that we measured. So this is the exact dimensions of our puzzle, but anytime you're making a template that you want to be filling and you want to be able to save it for future use, you need to also expand your design into a bleed space. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click and duplicate our rectangle, and then we're going to increase the size by 1/2 inch, both the height and the width. So we'll go right up here, and the width
will be 0.75 and 0.65 for the height. Now to make this easy to see, I'm going to click over here on my line color panel and select blue. And I'm just going to go ahead and increase that line thickness as well. We will center these together momentarily, but the first part is that we need to add our background or our design. So for today, I'm going to be doing the background separately because I'm just applying a background to a design that I already have. But if you were importing a photograph, you would import it and make sure you expand it to the blue line and then center your red box over top. So I'll show you that in just a second. For right now, I'm just going to move our red box out of the way. I'm going to go to File and then Merge. I'm going to choose a generic wood digital paper background. We'll just size this down a little bit. Now we can't tell obviously because the blue is behind it. So we'll right click on that blue rectangle and we'll hit Bring to Front. And now we'll move this back behind it and we will center it where we would like. In order to divide this, the shape which you want to divide needs to be in the back. So we're going to right click that blue again, or we'll right click our digital paper. It doesn't really matter which you choose. And we're going to make sure that the digital paper is on top with the rectangle below. So I'm going to select Bring to Front. I'm going to click and drag to make sure I have both items selected. Open up our Modify panel and hit Divide. We can remove the excess part. And now this is our background all the way to the bleed edge. So now we're going to bring that red back and we're going to bring to front so that we can see it. We will right click and drag. We're going to hit that center tool to make sure that it's centered, and I'll zoom in so you guys can see that a little bit better. So now we've made sure that our background is the exact size to that bleed edge. We're going to go to File and Merge again, and we're going to bring in our file that we want to put the design in the middle. So as I mentioned, a lot of people do photos on puzzles. For this tutorial, I'm just keeping it easy, and I'm going to use this week's free design of the week. If you haven't gotten it, be sure to head over to my website, www.ofloveandshiplap.us, and get that. And of course, if you're watching this video at a later date, you may not be able to still get it. Not for free at least, but you can always pay for it or sign up for the design membership. All right, so I'm just going to resize this down so it actually fits. And again, you can do that by just hitting your measurements up here or grabbing those corner nodes and resizing it. So now I'm going to bring this into the center of what would be our puzzle. If I zoom in just a little bit more so you guys can see a better picture, we can see that this red is the edge of our puzzle. Again, we want to make sure our design has this additional border, our bleed area, because that's going to ensure we do get full coverage, but we don't want our design to be cut off. So I'm going to go ahead and shrink this down just a little bit so that it fits nicely in between our red border. And then the last thing you want to do is, again, just click and drag everything and select that center tool so you can make sure that things are centered. Before you print this, you need to make sure to either remove your red rectangle, because remember, this is just a guide for your template, or you can head over here and select No Fill for the outline. This is now ready to print. So we would go to File, Print, and then choose your workforce printer and follow whatever settings you use whenever you print, depending on your ink and paper and the printer that you are using. Now let's head over to Inkscape. The first thing that we want to do in Inkscape is make sure that our page is set up to the correct size. So we'll do this again by going to File, Document Properties. This pop-up screen appears and we see the A4 is selected, and we want to go ahead and select US letter size. You can also choose custom size if necessary. Next, we're going to head over to our shape tool and we're going to create a shape just like we did in Silhouette that is the same size as our puzzle. So we'll click on our Create Rectangles and Squares, and we will go ahead and click and drag. Up here in our menu bar, we can see that the dimensions are in millimeters. So we'll click our drop-down menu and select inches. Next, we'll go ahead and modify this to be the correct inches that we need. Oops, let's try that again with the inches. All right, so we need this to be 5.25 wide and 7.165 tall. For continuity, I want to change the stroke to red because red represents what is the actual exact size of our substrate, and blue is going to represent our bleed line. So I'll go ahead and click on my stroke panel over here, my stroke tab, and the panel will appear. I can just select red from my color menu, and I can also decrease the weight of our line because this is a bit more than I want. Next, we're going to go ahead and right click and duplicate. We're going to click on our stroke paint, choose blue. We're going to click on stroke style and we'll make that a little bit thicker, just like we did before, so that it's easy to see. And then we're going to go up here into our menu and adjust our sizes. So we want this to be 5.75 inches wide and 7.625 inches tall. Now this is adding half an inch, so 0.5, to the original measurements that we measured with our ruler. Now I'm going to leave these separated just for the moment. I'm also going to decrease that blue line weight because it's a little much, so that we can use the blue to create a clipping mask. So we'll go ahead and start by going to File and Import to bring in our background. Well, we'll bring in our design since this one opened up. Obviously, this is much bigger than we need, so we're going to hit that lock aspect ratio. We're going to change our height. I'll just do 6.5 inches. And then it's disappeared somewhere off in the screen, which is okay. We will just select our Align and Distribute menu, make sure that we have selected Relative to Page. And if we just click on Center on the vertical and Center on the horizontal axis, it will end up right in the middle for us. All right. Now let's import our background. So we'll hit File, Import. And once again, you can resize this by clicking on the corner nodes and dragging down, or just very quickly entering in a space up here and then using that Align panel to get it where it needs to be. In Inkscape, in order to use our blue rectangle as a clipping mask, we want to make sure that it is on top. So we'll select our blue rectangle and then we're going to head over here to our navigation bar and click on this one that shows an arrow with the longest piece being on top. And this, if you hover over it, it tells you raise selection to the top. So we'll go ahead and center that over and figure out where about we want our background to be. And then we're just going to click and drag and we're going to right click, set clip. Now we can go ahead and move this into the center and size our design. So I like to use, actually what we'll do is we'll click and drag all of this. So we select all of it, and I just like using the relative to page size, but if you drop down, you can do first selected, last selected, drawing, selection area. You have different options for aligning. Okay, so now everything is centered, but of course our background is on top, which is a problem. So we'll once again just select our lower selection to bottom option. Now if I zoom in a little bit for you, so you can see better. we can see our red outline. This is letting us know what the actual border is of our puzzle. We've got some nice space around on the inside of it around our design. So our design is going to look nice on the puzzle, and we've made sure that our background extends into that bleed space. All we have left to do is either erase this or give the stroke no color. And we can just once again click on the stroke and hit the X for no paint. Just like that, this is ready to print. So you would go to File and then Print, select your printer and follow whatever settings you normally follow. Now let's have a look at Affinity Designer. Affinity Designer is going to be similar but a little bit different at the same time because Affinity Designer has more capabilities than both Silhouette and Inkscape. Just like we've done in the previous two programs, we're going to go to File and then New, and we'll create a new workspace based on the size that we are planning on printing. This page size will be dependent on your design, and just a reminder, we are doing letter size because our puzzle measurements was 5 1/4 by 7 1/8. So I'm going to click on letter size and hit create. I'm going to select my rectangle tool, click on it, click and drag. I will click, well, first I'm going to create the outline. So we'll head over to our color panel, and our filled in circle is the internal color. So we'll hit the little circle with the line through it to give it no color. And then we'll click on the stroke, as in the open outline, and we'll make that red, just like we've done before. We'll click on the stroke tab and make it just a little bit bigger so we can see it. Here we go. We're going to click on transform, and we're going to move over here to the width and height and adjust this to the measurement which we have already determined, which was 5 1/4 by 7 1/8 inches. As we move this, we can move it right into the center, and you could of course use the align panel as well, but you'll notice that the red and green showed up. Those are called snap guides, and you can activate those by clicking on the magnet in the top of your navigation bar. I'm just going to go ahead and rename this as our red line guide. I'm going to right click and duplicate. And our new one is going to be the one that represents our bleed line. So I'll just go ahead and double click on the name to rename this again, blue bleed line. And we want the bleed line to be below the red line so we can see it when we fill it. So we'll just drag it in our layers panel below it. It's really that easy. Next, we'll go ahead and add those same modifications by increasing the sizes that we did in Silhouette and in Inkscape. So in here, you can just enter plus 0.5 and it automatically does it. Once again, if you just shift them along, it will line up perfectly center on the page thanks to those snapping guides, or you can click and drag and use the align tool. Ooh, I did not change this to blue, so let's change that to blue really quick so we can keep up with our continuity. And if you're having trouble seeing it, you can click the stroke option and expand that as well. Next, we're going to hit the place image tool, which you can do with this little icon that looks like a picture, or go to File and then Place, and we'll import our background and our design just as we did before. Oh. Somehow I had selected text files in our file type on accident. Now, when you get the down arrow with the little puddle, or little portal, I guess you would call it, you're going to click and drag to be able to resize your design instead of importing it at full size. And I can just go ahead and move it and center it just like that. And once again, we'll hit that place image tool. And we'll choose just a wood digital background. We're going to click and drag once again. Now this is on top covering everything, so we will select that in our layer panel and simply drag it to the bottom. We can resize this so that it works with our blue bleed line. And then to fill it, it's a little easier in Affinity Designer because you don't have to worry about clipping if you don't want to. And all you have to do is select your item in the layers panel and drag it underneath the name. Now, if you drag it under the icon, it's just going to create a layer below it, which is where it currently is already. If we drag our shiplap piece under the name, blue bleed line, it will fill the rectangle. Just like we've done before, we want to go ahead and resize our design as necessary so that it fits nicely within that red rectangle. I'll zoom in so you can see that a little bit better. Now, if you happen to be making multiple pieces that you want to print, what you can do is make sure you've selected that icon and drag it into your blue box once you have it sized. Again, making sure to drag it underneath the name and above your background, and now it will be one piece. So when we click on that, it gives us one piece. And that's how you group without selecting and grouping, is basically what I just showed you. The last thing you want to do before you print this is just uncheck that red line so that it's not visible. This is one of the features or benefits of using a program like Affinity Designer, is that as you can save this template for future use, just the blue and red rectangles, or if you make a custom template, you can save it all and then just uncheck that red line to use it. And because we didn't have to clip anything out, when it comes time we've already printed this and we're done with it, you can just select your item in the layers panel, hit that trash can, and it removes it. And now we're back to our blank template to be able to use and save this for our puzzles. Once you have it filled, once again, you'll just go ahead and hit File and Print, and then follow the settings that you normally do. So let's switch back over to our workspace and we'll have a look at odd size objects and how to go about doing the custom templates for something that isn't a simple shape.
So now that we've covered items that are basic shapes and using the shape tool, let's talk about when we need a template for something that's maybe not as obvious. The first thing that comes to mind when I think of basic shapes that are not as obvious is all types of drinkware. A lot of people really fail to realize that things like a coffee mug or one of these scotch glasses or even the skinny tumbler are still rectangles. And to determine how big your rectangle should be, you're going to want to measure the height of your substrate, and then you'll want to measure the circumference of it. Now, many sublimation substrates like the skinny tumblers, and this particular glass is not for sublimation, but just I used it with white toner. It's still a good example. The top circumference and the bottom circumference should be within, somewhere between 1/8 and 1/2 of an inch of each other. This is close enough that you can just make a rectangle and you'll make it whichever the larger size is. So with that in mind, let's have a look at our skinny tumbler. So our skinny tumbler for the height is just at 8 inches. It's just a hair over that. So I'm going to put 8 1/8. So 8 1/8 of an inch is going to be 8.125. And now let's measure. If you have a cloth tape measure, you can just wrap it around, but I don't know where mine is at the moment. So I'm just going to measure the diameter across the center, and we've got 2 7/8 for the top. And then the bottom, we've got 2 1/2. Oop, that was supposed to be a fraction, sorry. Okay, these are pretty close, but even though they're not exact, they are within that 1/4 of an inch margin, to up to 1/2 an inch. So they are within the margin of error and you can still use a rectangle for this. So in order to determine the width of our rectangle or square, whatever it ends up being, we need to multiply our number. We'll use the larger one always. So the top, we're going to first convert it into a decimal, which is going to be 2.875. So 2 7/8 inches converted to a decimal is 2.875. And then we're going to multiply this by pi. You guys all should know what pi is. That is 3.14. And that is going to come to 9 inches, 0.275. Pretty sure that's accurate. So that is how you determine your circumference, because the formula for circumference is the diameter times pi. It's not really that difficult. And of course, you can use the calculator on your phone. That mine is currently occupied, so I can't use that one. Now, this is fine for stuff that is cylindrical, but if you find yourself with something that has a smaller bottom than top, like this latte thermos or a shot glass or a pint glass, then you need to still repeat the same process, measure the bottom, measure the top, measure the height, and then multiply. If you don't do the entire circumference, you want to multiply the diameter by 3.14, and that's going to give you the dimensions to create a trapezoid. Now you know. For those of you who don't know what trapezoid is, it looks like this. Usually has one side smaller than the other. That's a trapezoid. And again, you'll be able to use the trapezoid tool in any design, or the trapezoid shape tool in any design program. If you're using the Silhouette program, they have a warp tool, which you'll be able to enter in the measurements of whatever your latte shape is, and then input your design, and it will automatically warp or curve your text so that it's a little bit smaller here, and so it curves a little bit across this, and that will make it actually look straight when you print it. So that Silhouette warp tool is one of the easiest warp tools out of any design program. And if there's one thing that you can do in Silhouette, it is definitely take advantage of that feature if you have a substrate like this. Okay. So I just want to make sure I covered glassware really quickly, because I know that a lot of people don't think it's that obvious, but it really is. So as long as your top and bottom are within roughly 1/2 inch of each other in terms of the diameter or the circumference, you can make a rectangle with this. All right, get that out of the way. So now let's talk about odd shaped substrates. I'm going to keep it kind of easy for us. So when I say odd shape, I mean anything that's just not a square. It's not a square, it's not a rectangle. Maybe it has some shapes in it, but it's not complete. Now, I see a lot of people recommend that you just stick this on your printer and scan it in and call it good. The problem with that is it's not a good outline. You often get shadows. When you have things like these burn marks that are on the covering to this, the plastic film that's on this, that's going to pick up when you scan it. And it's just going to skew your results and not give you accuracy that you need. So I'm going to use this because it's a little bit easier. The first thing we want to do is measure it. Again, always measure your substrates. And we want to measure this before we do our template. We got 4 inches wide and 9 inches tall, so that when we import this and we create it, we can make sure that it is sized accordingly. So I'm just going to put this up here in the corner. We've got 4 inches wide by 9 inches tall. Now, if I move you guys just a little bit closer, so you can kind of see this. There we go. Sorry guys, trying to give you like the best view here. There we go. So what you're going to do is you're just going to hold this, and I prefer to hold my pen or my pencil or your Sharpie. You just want to hold it straight up and down, because then you're going to get a little bit of space away from your substrate because of the little part right here that holds that pen stick. So I'm going to try and do this around our camera. Okay. So I didn't do this with a Sharpie to start with because I didn't want to get Sharpie on it, and Sharpies have the really big tips. But you can scan it in like this. But for part of what I'm about to show you next, we're going to want to have this be a nice bold outline so that it will be picked up accordingly by the conversion program. With that in mind, we're going to take our Sharpie and we are just going to go over this. This does go a little bit faster when you don't have to juggle around a camera tripod and a light stand. So you guys get the idea. And if you don't mind sacrificing a substrate, you can absolutely just trace it with Sharpie to begin with. But just keep in mind, that Sharpies have a much bigger tip, so you won't get that space around. You'll end up getting marker on your substrate. All right, so now that we've traced this, we're going to go ahead and scan this into our computer. Now you can use any computer that you have. I'm going to use the Workforce 7710. I'll get you guys lowered so you can see it. All right. So I've got my printer here. We're going to start by lifting up our scanner unit. And we're going to stick this all the way back in that top left corner. You'll see that there is a little arrow. Can you guys see my finger? Okay, there's a little arrow up here that tells you like that's where your paper goes. So go ahead and close that. And then let me adjust that lighting so you guys can see a little better. We'll zoom in. Okay, I know it's a little hard to see because of the, there we go. All right, let's give our screen a minute here. Okay, so we're gonna hit the scan button. You're gonna see this come up. You're gonna hit computer. Hold on, guys. Sorry, you guys couldn't see it very well. If you haven't installed the complete drivers and everything, it's going to alert you before the screen pops up. But as long as you have, you'll go ahead and pick whatever size paper you have. In this case, we've got letter size. And then I'm going to pick my computer and I'll hit save. Oop. Let's try that again. There we go. There's my computer. And we'll hit save. And now it's going to go ahead and scan over to my computer. So I will switch this over to there and show you guys the next step. When we head over to our computer screen, we'll be able to see where we scanned in our template outline.
Now I actually did 2 scans. I did one as a PDF and one as a JPEG, and I didn't show it to you, but on the drop down menu on your screen that I showed you before we hit the scan button, it does give you the option to select the file type. Not all design programs can import a PDF, which is why it's a good idea to use the JPEG. Plus, using the JPEG gives you the ability to convert this to an SVG. So to do that, we're going to go ahead and go to convergio.co. This is probably my favorite file conversion website. We're going to click on Choose Files. We will select the JPEG of our door hanger. We'll select the file type. It's already selected SVG for us, but if it didn't, you would click the drop-down menu and choose which one you were looking for. And then we'll go ahead and hit Convert. It'll give you the option to download it once the conversion has finished. I've already done this step, so I just wanted to show it to you guys. For those of you who are using programs that work best with SVGs, or for those of you who do better with SVG files, I'm not going to show you the steps again in Inkscape and in Silhouette for filling this because it's still the same process that I just showed you. We're just going to be using a different shape. So if you would rather use an SVG for those, you can. Otherwise, what you can do is import our JPEG or the SVG, you import the JPEG or the PDF and then use the pen tool. So I'm going to show you that in just Affinity Designer. It's the same process in the other 2 programs if you choose not to use the SVG option. So we'll go ahead and we will go to File and New. Once again, I'm going to select letter size because that's appropriate for what we're doing. And I'm going to click on the Place Image tool. And go over to where our picture imported. And I'm going to select the PDF option. Now, because we selected letter size and because we scanned this on letter size, we're going to stretch this all the way to the corner so we can make sure it's the appropriate height. I'm going to lock this. Now, using the pen tool option is the best option if you want to have nice smooth lines. So if you're someone who is making templates to resell and you want to make sure that this is printed, this is accordingly for your customers, then this is the step that you want to do. Or if you're a seller who just wants to have a nicer looking template to go with your blank, this is the option that you would use. You can, of course, use, vectorization features in programs like Inkscape or Photoshop, but you're still not going to get as nice smooth lines as if you just recreate it. And it really doesn't take that much time. So we'll go, and that's why I'm only showing it to you in Affinity Designer, because it's still going to use the pen tool in Silhouette or Inkscape or GIMP. You will use the pen tool regardless of which program you choose and just do the same process of tracing it. So, you should be able to follow along with whatever program you're using. So click on our pen tool. I'm just going to go ahead and get started. Actually, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so that you guys can see better and so that I can see better. Okay. Got our pen tool, and we will just go right ahead and start creating our lines. Now, the way that I go about this is I just sort of click around every place where I see that there's a curve. I'm going to add a new node so that I know that I'm going to need to adjust my lines in between the curve to make it line up evenly. And the more that you do this, the better you get at it. So don't be discouraged if yours doesn't line up quite as perfectly as you would like it to start. So you just want to make sure to click on that last node to close your loop. Now I want to be able to see this, so I'm going to click on my open circle, And then I'm just going to give this a red outline, and I'm going to make that stroke kind of noticeable for us. Actually, the red kind of blends in with the black. Let's go with yellow. There we go. That's a little easier to see. So we're going to zoom in. And now I'm going to click on our node tool. And this is going to allow me to adjust our line. So when I hover over the line, we get that little hash mark, and we can expand this out to make sure that it fits all of our traced line. So if you find yourself needing to make a modification like here where it doesn't quite fit, you'll click on your node and then you'll use these little handles. So you have two different ways to modify. I also noticed that my node is inwards a little bit on my black line, so I'm going to click on it and I'm just going to use my arrow key and move it over to make sure that it is on the line the way it needs to be. And once again, we can kind of use our nodes to give that the nice appropriate curve that it needs. And we can bring this node out just a little bit. There we go. You can see that this goes pretty quickly. I mean, this is not a difficult process. If you had a more detailed custom shaped blank, then it might be a little bit more of a process, but overall it is not a bad process. And you only have to do it once because you'll save your files that you make, and then the next time around they are already ready to go for you to fill them. I'm gonna just bring that down. Okay, okay. And just like that, our outline is done. So now what we can do is we can actually just remove that lock key so we don't move it, and we can throw this away. Throw it in the trash because we don't need that anymore, and we're gonna make this red so that we can see it just like before. We're gonna double check our measurements by clicking on the transform panel. So we've got that the width is 4.115 inch, and we know that it's supposed to be right exactly at 4 inches. So a little bit bigger is okay, but we can adjust it if we wanted to worry about that, not even 1/8 of an inch. That's most likely just the line width added to it, and then our 9 inches. So we're close enough for this, but if you did want to be particular, you could go ahead and do 4 inches by 9 inches to make sure that it is perfect. Now, one of the things that's going to be different is that when you want to make your bleed line for this, you're still going to right click and duplicate, but you're going to have to make a few additional modifications to it. So let me just move it over here. We will make this one blue. I'm going to double click to rename it so that you guys can easily see what I'm talking about. We'll start with the same process that we did last time, where we just added 1/2 inch to this and added 1/2 inch to the height. And then we'll go ahead and line it up behind it. Now, one of the things you're going to notice is that there are certain parts of this that didn't quite work when we did that. And that's the difference between using a custom shape and using like a preset, just basic square or circle shape. So the way that we fix this is with our blue selected. We're going to go ahead and select our node tool again, and we're just going to bring in all of these ones that are not giving us the nice border. We're just going to expand them out. That's all that it needs. That's all that's kind of going on here. Oops. So you want to click on each of the nodes first and drag them in or out, whatever term you want to use. And then we'll go ahead and adjust our lines to match. And you can, of course, move this closer depending on what it won't, you know, it won't be as an exact 1/4 inch all the way around the way it is with the set size that I just showed you, but it still achieves the same goal. So if you have any sharp points like right there, you just adjust to smooth them out. There we go. We still got a little bit of a sharp point. Okay. So you can spend time smoothing this out because we're doing a demo and I don't want this to go on forever. I'm just going to simplify it with how it is. And once again, we would just repeat the exact same process. So if we wanted to fill this with a pattern, we would do our place image. And we'll just kind of repeat what we've already been doing. We'll do the just a wooden background real quick. And then we can click and drag it. Once again, we want it to fill that blue area, so we need to drag it in to our bleed line. Remember, not underneath the icon, underneath the words. And if you watch, as you hold it and hover in your layers panel, it shows you what it's doing on the screen before you unclick it. All right. And then we want to make sure our design fits within this red line, because we know that that is the specific size of our substrate, and that the rest of this is just designed for us to have that bleed to make sure we get perfect full coverage. So we'll hit place image and we will select our design. All right. And we will go ahead and size that right in between. Now, I'm sure someone will ask, and I didn't mention this yet. So if you, where you see this green line and this like down the center and this red line on the bottom, these are called your snapping guides in Affinity Designer. And this is letting us know that this is lined up accordingly with the center of our blue shape that we've made. Now, if we drag this, for example, into the center of the page, we would see the line doesn't completely extend to the top and the bottom of the page. That tells us we're not actually in the center. This lets us know we're edge to edge with the edge of our blue line that we've created, and this lets us know we're right in the center of the whole page. So if you pay attention to those snapping lines, they can really help you. If you don't see your snapping lines, you just go ahead over here to this magnet shaped icon and click it or unclick it. So if it's compressed, depressed, that means that it is on. And if it is risen up, that means that it is off. And then of course, last but not least, we want to make sure to uncheck our original line. And so we just have our blue outline, and you can choose to turn the blue outline off as well, but it is still a good guide. And this is ready to print. And you can, of course, save this template for future use, or if you plan on issuing designs for this or anything of that nature. I hope that this tutorial was easy for you guys to follow. If you guys have any questions, please be sure to leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't joined us on Facebook or YouTube, please be sure to do that as well. Thank you so much for joining us, and have a great rest of your day.